Okay, thanks. Ravi, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Hi.
well, you're Robbie is an esteemed journalist here in the Philippines, and he's going to act as kind of our facilitator and moderator for the Philippines segment.
Okay. Hi. Good morning to everyone from the Philippines. Mabuhay. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor and a pleasure. We're sort of just handing off to each other. I'm actually supposed to introduce Hayam as well, but let me just acknowledge what Jonathan said, that World Vasectomy Day really has its roots in the Philippines. We're happy to continue this conversation, and certainly to see so many friends and colleagues and champions from all over the world. Our recent study shows that vasectomy internet inquiries and searches rose by 211%. Today, DKT Philippines is happy to co-host this World Vasectomy Day Global Forum. We are, of course, eager to share the vasectomy program in the Philippines and discuss other relevant issues. A lot of things that we anticipate everybody's also seeing and observing and experiencing in your respective societies. Our speakers today will come from three areas in the Philippines. We're, of course, in Metro Manila, in the National Capital Region. We will have speakers from the south in Davao, in Mindanao, as well as in the north in Baguio City, in the mountain provinces of the Philippines. Now, as one of the largest providers of family planning products and services in the developing world, DKT International hopes to raise awareness, of course, of sexual health and contraceptive options. They believe in the importance of encouraging all individuals, men especially, to actively share in reproductive responsibilities. Now, in its third year, DKT in the Philippines continues to support World Vasectomy Day, the movement through the leadership of the country director and chairman of the DKT Philippines Foundation. Let me bring back Mr. Hayam Bolan.
Hi, everyone. So great to see you all, and great to be participating in this broadcast, this global broadcast for World Vasectomy Day. Here in the Philippines, we are coming to the close of the first week of what's a two-week festival. World Vasectomy Day is really a two-week festival here in the way that we're running it, and it's a two-week festival of free vasectomies that are being given, as Robbie said, in three different sites across the country. Here in the first week, we've been doing here in Manila, the country's capital, and also in Davao, which is a major city in the south of the Philippines. Next week, we will have one more week of free vasectomies being offered in Baguio. So three cities. This year is the third year consecutively that DKT Philippines has staged World Vasectomy Day in the Philippines. Like everybody said, the whole concept may have had its roots in the Philippines some years ago, but it wasn't until 2019 that we decided to actively organize and sponsor this as an annual festival. And each year we're increasing our target for how many free vasectomies we hope to perform during the period. And this year's target is 180. So yeah, Robbie, we're pretty excited, and we're reaching nearly the midway point for this year's go.
Thank you, Hayam. Now let's dive into the conversation. We'll have three panelists here. I'll introduce everyone, and what we want to do is just have a conversation. We'll try to save some time as well, so that we could take questions from everyone listening in. You could feel free to comment in the chat section, and we'll try to accommodate a few questions. We'll only have about 30 minutes for this conversation, and then open up for a Q&A. But let me introduce everybody at the same time. First of all, an advocate for male involvement in safe motherhood, Dr. John D. Flavier is the chairman of the Cooperative Movement for Encouraging No Scalpel Vasectomy, and he's also a nominee for the upcoming elections in the Philippines, a party list representative for the Kabayan party list, John D. Flavier. Then he will be joined by Dr. Diego Danila, who is a medical specialist and lead of local and sectoral engagement team of the Department of Health, particularly the Disease Prevention and Control Bureau. And we will have one as well, from the perspective of one very satisfied, very happy vasectomy acceptor, and now an advocate. In fact, he leads in fact, it has built and is leading and is part of a community of people, particularly males, who are quite happy to share their experience and to promote. Rocco Mapua, he's also from the private sector and really speaking from the perspective of a citizen. So welcome, John D, Diego, and Rocco. And John D, I want to start it off with you. I want to lead off on questions. Maybe you could talk about myths and misconceptions in the public. Talk about public acceptance in particular, what males in the Philippines are dealing with. But also, just so we don't lose it, I do want to start off very quickly on that question earlier from our friends. Midwives, do they have the capacity to carry out vasectomies here as well? I think you're on mute, John D.
Thank you. To answer your question first, Robbie, the one from our midwife friends, unfortunately, our Philippine medical system tends to be too closed. We do not even allow our other paramedics to perform many of these procedures like a vasectomy. So the short answer is no, but we're pushing for more engagement. The saving grace is the midwife settings, the midwife birthing homes are wonderful venues for doing vasectomies. So that's a good partnership that we have. Then the second point that you're raising about vasectomy, I appreciate your recognition of the huge increase in percentage of vasectomy, heading to 200% in nationally, increasing to even 300% in Baguio and some other areas. But we are all friends here, so I have to strip off that percentage and give you more of the reality. I used to tease the mayor of Baguio because I told him that in his city, the number of vasectomies increased by 300%. And that was because he only had one vasectomy for the whole year. And when he had three, because of DKT, that was a 300% increase. So yes, we're doing well. When we started in the year 2000, there were only 20 vasectomies in the whole of the Philippines. It became 200. Now we're averaging around 2,000 a year. And here's the big but: the unmet need, or the men and couples, especially the women who say that they no longer want to get pregnant, that number is 2 million or more. So that's a huge number compared to the 2,000 that we have. The percentage increase is wonderful, but the challenge is still daunting.
Okay, thanks for keeping it short and sweet, John. That gives me time now to bring in Diego Danila. Again, let me stress, Diego is from the DOH. Diego, talk about that unmet need, and what does that mean for the future of contraceptive programs and male participation in reproductive health now and in the future? Diego? Is Diego here?
He's on mute.
You're on mute, Diego. Okay,
Yeah. Male participation in family planning is one of the big challenges in the Philippines. As you all know, Filipino male has this culture of masochism. They don't want to get involved with anything that's pertaining to family planning. They always think that reproductive health is a women's business, that we always try to change that attitude. So in our new program for men's reproductive health, we changed that attitude by introducing 3 areas where we will involve men as number one, as a client, because they themselves have reproductive health concerns, and they always ask that. We always think about girls, women, female support of reproductive health, but what about us? So we will try to answer that as a client. Number two, as a partner, which we always want them to be. And number three, as an agent of change. So we will try to address this. A while ago, John D said that it's very hard to convince male to go into vasectomy. But the thing is, we never address their concern. They have many concerns, such as, for example, I don't want to go to permanent reproductive health contraception yet. I'm still young, and what if my youngest son died? So there are many concerns among them. Is there any temporary method that we can have, like women, like pills, something like that? They have many questions in their mind. So we have to address that. Yeah, it's a big challenge, and coupled with the pandemic. Remember, this pandemic has really stalled our program, especially for men's health. But we will never sit down with this. As John D said, the BMONC is a good platform. And mind you, we have this, we call this the prostate gland reproductive. We have trained many midwives who have knows how to palpate prostate gland in males. We can start with that. We can make that as a platform to introduce a minor surgery for midwives. But again, this is a big block because the Philippine systems for midwife is rather strict. You know, we don't allow midwife to do surgical procedure. Yeah, that's true, and it's a big challenge. But together we will challenge this. We will do this. We will address this challenge. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Diego. Now let me bring in Rocco. Rocco, if you don't mind, I want to just to round it out, the perspectives all around. Speak to us about your experience as a citizen, and as as an individual. What were the barriers that personal, knowledge-wise, social, cultural, that you yourself had to contend with? And now that you are leading a community, talk to us a bit about that community as well. But also, what are the barriers that you're also encountering and seeing and helping people deal with there?
Personally, I actually had no barriers. I wanted to get the vasectomy while I was in high school, and I brought this up with my parents then, and they told me to wait. So I kind of did. I waited 20 years before I got my vasectomy, and I'm happy that I got it eventually. I should have gotten it sooner. That being said, some of the barriers that I've experienced. Well, let me start by giving a little bit of context. My partner and I made a social media post about my vasectomy on the day that I got it, and the post kind of went viral. It went around the world. We were getting responses from people all the way in Ukraine even, and the response was actually largely positive, although we occasionally got trolls come to our post, and we kind of had to control that and stamp out that fire. But the response was largely positive, and from this post, we got a lot of inquiries from not just from men, but also from their wives about vasectomies locally, from people that we knew, but also from people who had seen the post, and they were strangers, but they were sending us private messages, and we were as much as possible trying to allay their fears. And the biggest question, the question that everybody asked was, did it hurt? And it's a difficult question to ask because to answer because it's different from person to person. The experience is a bit different. Some people have a higher pain tolerance. So what we did in order to answer this question was to fall back on my experience. And I can say that there was a little bit of pain, but nothing extreme. And it was done in less than 5 minutes. The wait for the operation was much longer. So I tell them this and reassure them that they would have a relatively pleasant experience. And I actually sometimes some of the people I would tell that I wish that I had been given a mirror so that I could watch the operation as it was happening. So that's something that I should have asked for. But all in all, we've managed to encourage quite a few people, strangers and friends, to get vasectomies. And even up to last week, I was having a conversation with a friend about my experience, and they had told me that, yeah, they were going to get one eventually. I had told them about World Vasectomy Day and encouraged them to go to where I went to get the free vasectomy. Another question is, does this have any effect on sex and ejaculation, to be direct? And I tell them that safe sex is great sex. And I'd say no. After the brief recovery period, which is 1 to 2 weeks for me, it's been great. I've been very happy with my vasectomy, and I've been having worry-free sex with my partner.
Robbie, can I make a quick comment?
Yes, go ahead. Hi.
Yeah, one of the things that about the pain concern, which Rocco raised, is a big one for a lot of people. We put together a couple of testimonial videos for this year's marketing campaign for World Vasectomy Day. And a point that was raised by one of our testimonials by an acceptor was he compared it to having a circumcision. And the reason why this is significant is for those in the international audience is that in the Philippines, it's very common and traditional for many men to have a circumcision when they're a teenager, when they're around 13 years old. So, his comment was, well, it's a lot less painful than a circumcision was. And I thought that was really interesting because it's, again, very, very common for people to have that. So if they could go through that once in their life, vasectomy is actually not too bad. Another thing is that it's not so much for people who are interested in vasectomy but hesitating. They're already past this. But just to get the topic on the table, one of the biggest fears is the misconception that vasectomy is a castration, basically, and that people will lose their manhood by getting a vasectomy. This is one of the biggest obstacles to just even getting the conversation started and getting people to even listen a little bit. So we, in our marketing campaigns, we've been really keen on this. And our slogan is keep your santol and lose your fear of unexpected pregnancy. And santol is a local fruit that is used as a metaphor for testicles in the Philippines. And I felt like it was really important to say that, even if it may seem kind of obvious, because there are so many men out there who think when you talk to them about vasectomy that you're asking them to lose their testicles. So we keep harping on this one year after year, and I hope it helps.
Thank you. Now, a quick question to John D and to Rocco, both in your communities and also from the field. Both of you touched on this. Questions are coming from men as well as their wives. But who first? I mean, between them, is that a 50-50 split, or is there a particular trend and the split in the demographics in terms of who overcomes the barriers of the first barrier of asking a question?
I'd like to go first on this one.
I'll defer to Rocco first.
So what we noticed was that a lot of wives would tag their husbands in our post so that they would see it. So I'm going to make an assumption based on what we've seen, that it's the wives that are encouraging their husbands to get the vasectomy. And it's mainly because we harp on or we emphasize the point that it's non-invasive and it's safer than getting bilateral or ligation for women. So it's actually something that we recommend to the couples that we know that want to practice a little more permanent method of family planning.
But let me prompt
Right.
that a bit. Let me prompt that a bit because I joined because and maybe with Diego as well. I want to know how that translates in the communities. I mean, it's fairly easy to tag somebody on Facebook, right? It's really the barriers is so easy. But outside of social media, on the ground, especially in rural areas, how does that dynamic play out in the real world between a husband and a more curious and more active woman who wants to, not just tag somebody, but actually, bring somebody all the way to the clinic to hear for himself.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, Rocco had his vasectomy much early, much more recently. Mine was almost 20 years ago, and I have to confess that in my case, my wife was very hesitant because he thought her husband was handsome. So because he thought I was so handsome, he hesitated that having a vasectomy would not prevent me from behaving. But of course, she realized that my defects would play out in the long run and let me have it. But joking aside,
Yeah,
yes,
we'll
it's
file that
more.
under we'll file that under myths and misconceptions.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So the reality is there are wonderful social media approaches, but I work in the rural areas where text may sometimes be even difficult. SMS may even be difficult, and internet is almost impossible. So in this setting, it's really the social relationships that play out. And Dr. Jiggs already narrated the cultural characteristics of Filipino men. You also have to consider the cultural characteristics of the Filipino woman. And in this case, the general tendency is the woman would let her husband, who's a farmer or a worker, be the ones who will be free from the burden of vasectomy. And that's one social aspect that we have been noticing. The woman would be more comfortable being the one having the surgical procedure. The other problem is Dr. Jiggs is an exception, but when you look across the Philippine primary care setting, most of the providers are women. So the services tend to be feminized, and in a sense, it's not that easy talking to the men when most of our field workers are female midwives and the like. So those are two dimensions that I would like to share. But before I let go and let the others share, I'd also like to go back to the issue of regret. Rocco is an amusement for me because it's a wonderful reality where there are men and women who have not had children and yet would want a vasectomy. Forgive me, Rocco, I come from the old school where we have to be careful with men who have only one child or no children because the regret would set in. And here, the first point I'd like to share is, in Rocco's case, since high school, he had been considering this issue. So counseling, consideration, and decision-making are very important to avoid regret. And the last point for this concern, Robbie and our audience, is we had a guilt complex before because we tried to capture men who would be susceptible to vasectomy. And we set up the vasectomy service near hospital delivery rooms. And if you know how women deliver, they would curse their husbands, shout at them. And then when the husbands are outside, we offer vasectomy. And many of them were willing to have the vasectomy. Unfortunately, we were sanctioned for taking advantage of vulnerable men. So they were saying, you are pushing this or pressuring them. So we made a survey and measured regret among all those men who had the vasectomy. And the other sample was the men who were friends with these guys. We also measured regret. Unfortunately, for men who had the vasectomy, there was 0.2% regret. But on the flip side, there was 20% regret among men who did not have the vasectomy. In other words, they would have wanted the vasectomy in the first place, but others very few regret in that case.
Yeah, can I add to that note? Can I add something?
Go ahead, Dr. Jigs.
Yeah, and you all know that the Philippines is one of the countries who has a law for reproductive health, the RPRH law. And I think John P. can relate to this and remember that one of the functions of the RPRH law is if there is any permanent method or surgical method involved to be given to the couple, it should be a consensual decision. Both couples should abide to it. If it's a temporary method, no permission is added to the wife or to the partner. But if it's a permanent method, the court stipulates that it should be discussed among couples. So the regrets should be taken away, regrets, something like that. So the couple should really decide, I will go into a permanent method. Would it be you or would it be me? They have to discuss that fully because we should all consider that this is permanent method. And one of the questions being asked to us by client is it reversible? We all know that microsurgery for a is very hard and not yet that easy. So these are questions that we have really to address prospective client. Besides the pain, besides that it's reversible. What if my wife died? I married again and want to have questions are really nagging, and we have to address that. So this is one part of the strategy. The client, let's address the concern of the client. If we can address them, then this client will become a partner for reproductive health, a partner to women's reproductive health. And become a partner and we have addressed them as a client, they will become an agent of change. They become an agent like your client there in Bago. They will become an agent of change and they will tell people, encourage other men to do the same. I've been there and this is what I have done. Yeah, that's it.
I see Jonathan's hand up. Jonathan, you have a question?
Yeah, I was really curious, like everything is in place for the program to really grow. And we've seen programs grow and we know that there are obstacles. I was wondering if to what extent the Catholic Church, which is very strong in the Philippines, kind of really plays a really kind of dampening, well, I'm imagining for vasectomy, but I suppose for all family planning methods. And I'll just close my mic, but I'm curious what you guys are thinking.
Yeah. Before anybody answers, let me give a quick background on that. We, as Dr. Jigs mentioned, we did already pass a reproductive health law after literally decades of Catholic lobby against it. But that was really a milestone, landmark piece of legislation. Obviously, a lot of things going into that, a lot of real-world lessons on how to push through a modus vivendi with the Catholic Church. We keep asking that of local governments as well, where that Catholic influence is really magnified and really felt at the local level. So there is a modus vivendi. We've spoken with a lot of religious saying that they know what we have to do. We know we just need to do our work. So I just wanted to give that very quick, broad background to free you up. John D. And Jigs to discuss the real world details of how is it now and what's the difference between how the religious would handle vasectomies in this case versus what has been the more prominent issues before with condoms and ligations and family planning and so on. John D?
Yeah, I'm sorry to note that in our practice, there are very few priests who have a vasectomy. I think there should be more, but we're not having any priests having a vasectomy, even if they have too many children. But let me go to Dr. Jigs' point, and that is there is Catholic opposition at the very high levels of policy making. But let me bring you down to the community and the household. And in that setting, the man and the woman don't really care about what their parish priest will say, since the parish priest comes only once every month or the like. The two important deterrents to family planning practice among women in my country are unfortunately the husband and the mother-in-law. So those are the two influences that affect some of these decisions. But having said that, I will go back to what Jonathan Stack alluded to as the drivers of vasectomy. And here we are in Davao City. You can look behind me, and Davao City in the Philippines is one of the cities with the most number of NSVs. So we examined, and this is a place where there is a confluence, a convergence of drivers. One, there have to be people like Rocco who demand the service. Number two, there have to be people like Jigs or other service providers who are there to give the service. And finally, there have to be local government executives and other policymakers who will give the support. So the demand, the service providers, and the support from financing and policies that bring these together. These all came through in Davao City. Historically and sentimentally, the former mayor that really started the campaign for vasectomy here in Davao City is president now. So that's one frustration I have. I thought that what he did in Davao City, he would do or influence nationally, but that did not happen. I'm sorry to say.
Okay. A quick question. Given the dynamics between husband and wife, and for that matter, John, the in-laws, as you pointed out, and I guess something also that goes to what Rocco said. I mean, parents of couples. I mean, Rocco, you said you had no barriers, but the reality is your parents told you to hold off on it, and so on. But given all of those realities, what does that mean, Jigs, John D, and maybe Rocco, you would have some ideas on it, on communicating and communication strategies for this? So, who do you target? Who should we be targeting? And is there anything about the crafting of the messages that you think can stand improvement?
So,
Can I answer that, or
Go ahead, Jigs.
yeah, there are four population or audiences that we target in communication. Of course, number one is the client or the couple, and then the community, headed by your local chief executive, and then the third is the church. And the fourth or the last is higher authorities, and of course the service provider. So you have to go all these 5 levels. No, even if the client wants to have permanent method and they fully agree they had, we still have one obstacle. It's the service provider. We have this so-called consensus objector. In the reproductive health law, we have addressed these consensus objectors. A consensus objector is someone who refuses to do a method based on his religious convictions. So one of the provisions of the Supreme Court there is this is a consensus objector. He or she has the option not to do it, just like an anti-vaxxers. No, you cannot force me to be vaccinated. And like a consensus objector, I will delegate this to someone else. And right now, we don't know how many of them are consensus objectors there. Also, as I told you before, the Philippines is a highly Catholic country, a highly patriarchal country who listens to norms and traditions. So if the clients agreed and there's a consensus, remind you, the local government can be a consensus objector too. If that local government says that no permanent method should be done here, I give you an example. The city of Manila, we had trouble with the city of Manila before because the LGU head and the mayor is one of the consensus objectors. People, our clients, tend to migrate to borders like neighborhood cities or provinces to have the method that they want. So as you can see in the program, we have to address all these levels: the client, the community, the service providers, the church, and the chief executive or the government. We have to go all through this and have the successful acceptance of service delivery of methods of choice that they want.
Okay.
I'll be very short, Robbie, because I'm beside one of 25 men who have just had their vasectomy today and the surgeon who performed this. But I will start off by confessing that I have decided, because of my small stature, not to fight public misconception, not to actively fight, but address them as they come. One thing is the very difficult challenge or task of changing public minds. And I made a mistake earlier in my career where I would always insist, hindi ito kapon, hindi ito kapon. In English, this is not castration, this is not castration, this is not castration. And the feedback was, all they remembered me saying was castration, castration, castration. So the challenge was so bad for me. So I decided I'll just work on the men who would really be excited to have vasectomy. And the first lesson we had was not to come in with vasectomy. The first question we posed is something that Rocco would appreciate. We asked, do you want to have children? Do you have to want more children? So that's a question we posed first. And then begin to address what methods would be possible for them to utilize.
If I can add something just really quick.
Yes, please.
Something that's not been actually discussed up to this point, and I think it's a really good time to bring it up. So I'll start by saying that my partner and I are 100% child-free by choice. What that means is that we've opted not to procreate. And the beauty of this is that we're finding that there are more and more people like us that are coming forward. And right now, the option to not procreate is somewhat taboo. It's expected that you're going to get a job, get married, have children, live happily ever after. But what we're seeing, and this is also a discussion that involves my parents, because my parents, if they had known better, would have chosen to be child-free. And it doesn't hurt when they tell me this, when they come to the realization and we have this discussion together. But they're actually quite proud of me, and they felt proud of me when I talked to them about getting a vasectomy early on in high school. But they did advise me to wait, and that's perfectly fine because I was young, and I agree with them that ultimately I agreed with them that I had to wait. But anyway, so my partner and I, neither of us are interested in having children. We were never interested in having children, and this started even before we were dating 8 years ago. I feel that the desire or decision to have children is something that people should always discuss. Not even before they get into relationships, but it should be a norm. It should be something that it should be something discussed as an option and not programming where you're expected to have children when you get married. And so where was I? So I think right now the idea of not having children and not wanting children is so shocking and taboo that when you say when other people, my relatives are a little bit more forward thinking and a little bit more but a little bit more progressive, but other people sharing their experiences get the response of shock when they say, I don't want to have children. All of a sudden, what's wrong with you, kid? So we need to bring the discussion or the option of not having children more forward and make it a norm. And in that way, because of the group that I'm in, more and more of us are coming forward and saying, hey, I don't want to have children either. More and more people will join, or have been joining the child-free group that we've created. I'm not the leader, or I'm just a member. But you see, a lot of us are like-minded, and my partner and I don't see ourselves ever regretting not having children, especially with the way that the world is now, with the climate crisis, with pandemics, overpopulation. There's a resource scarcity that we project or that we see in the future, and it doesn't make sense to add more humans to this planet, especially since we feel that they'll only suffer over the next few decades.
Okay.
But that's just an opinion that my partner and I share, and we actually share it with a lot of members of Child Free Philippines.
Okay. Thank you, Rocco. Let me just bring in a few comments in our chat if you're not seeing it. First, DKT Philippines points out the majority of their NSD clients. We were talking about the religious barriers and the Catholic lobby. Notwithstanding that, the majority of DKT clients for NSD are in fact Catholic. I guess that's an inevitability as well. 90% of the population are Catholics also. There's also this comment that a more positive communication strategy is always better. Keep your santol, it's pointed out, resonates. Now we will hand off. We want to hand off. John D mentioned he's sitting next to some people who just had the procedure. We want to bring in our friends from DKT Philippines. They're in two centers right now, one in Manila, one in Davao City. Davao City is in Mindanao in the south. I want to bring in Lawrence and Loida. I understand we have some friends there that we can talk to.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So good morning from the Philippines. So my name is Lawrence from the DKT Philippines Foundation, and we would like to welcome you to one of the locations for this year's World Vasectomy Day celebration here at Commission on Population and Development here in Mandaluyong City, Philippines. So we have been assisting a lot of patients since the start of the celebration, and for today, we are expecting 20 patients who will undergo non-scalpel vasectomy. The census have been doubled from last year, which is a good indication that more and more men are participating in the family planning through non-scalpel vasectomy. So here with me today, one of the clients for the non-scalpel vasectomy, we have Sir Gran. All right. So Sir Gran, how are you feeling today, knowing that in a few minutes you will undergo non-scalpel vasectomy?
Yes, I'm feeling a little bit nervous because for the longest time I believe this is I'll be having a procedure for for years now. So I'm a little bit nervous because of that, but I'm prepared and very excited to start.
Yeah.
To start the procedure. And, I feel
Well, what made you decide to undergo non-scalpel vasectomy?
I decided to do the procedure not because I want to do this personally. And, I did this because I want to make sure that I won't be jeopardizing the future of my children because I want to have another or having an unplanned child to make sure that I will be providing for my parents enough for them, and we could prepare their future.
Yeah, exactly. And Sir Gran, what are the preparations that you have done for this procedure, for the non-scalpel vasectomy?
Yes. Number one procedure that number one preparation that I did is I made sure that I am fully committed, that I won't be changing my mind once I got here, and I researched a little bit that I am procedure ready, I did a little bit of exercise. And last night, I did not wear underwear, so it's easy to find the gas difference. And I could finish the procedure successfully and for a shorter time.
Okay. Sir, last question. So after this procedure,
Yes, of course. I've been telling my friends and family about this. And, like I said, this is not just for me and for my wife to enjoy sex life without any
A little tough internet.
I think it's just, I don't know if it's just me, but we seem to be having technical problems
with the
on our side.
to make sure that we are prepared for our kids, for their future.
yes, exactly. All right.
Okay.
Could I just jump in because we're getting close to time, but I had really one last question and maybe for everybody. And it's certainly for Chaim as well. Which
All
is,
right. So thank you, Sir Brad. You may have room. So just to give you a quick. Okay.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
yeah, I just wanted to say that, first of all, what a great group of people and so much, I'm really amazed by the men who are speaking so openly and, going against what it seems like there is a bit of resistance. But if you think about it, I mean, you guys are very much at the edge just to begin something I think that could be really big. And I'm just curious, Chaim, maybe to you is like, what do you think we can do from World Vasectomy Day to help you guys get over to that next level? Because when we did it with, in Mexico, when we started, it wasn't that much better than the Philippines. And we've seen big growth, but we've seen growth you've been doing. And just curious what we can do to be better support to the work you're doing.
Well, Jonathan, I think our attitude toward the campaign is that just simply by returning to this festival on an annual basis, repeating year after year, that will gradually build up the consciousness and the level of awareness, and the demand will rise gradually together with that. I mean, that's the main reason why we're doing this. And in between World Vasectomy Days, I mean, during the other 11 months of the year, of course, we're doing our best to drum up interest in vasectomies and make sure that people who are interested in getting them can have access. But it's really just the time is on our side. I think the question you're really asking is what could be done to accelerate the process. I'm really pleased with the support we've gotten from the global effort so far. I mean, in terms of materials, thoughts, enthusiasm, all the things that we get, it's all good. I guess the one thing that I think might make our footprint bigger in the Philippines and accelerate things is the hardest would be more funding. We're investing pretty heavily here from our side as DKT Philippines. But the advertising work and the advertising and promotion work is really key, and that takes cash.
Yeah.
So so if Santa Claus came and said, "What do you want for Christmas?" I'd say more funding for this.
Yeah, that would be the miracle. That's what we all are seeking. But I think I just wanted to, as we sort of fade from one conversation to another, I wanted to introduce Allison Hoover, who's here, and she's hosting for International Conference of Family Planning. And I'm thinking about next year, it's going to be in Thailand, and maybe to speak about that. But I think, the collective advocacy for financial support for male engagement in family planning is something we all need. It's obviously not been the priority. And I don't know, Allison, if you want to just jump right in. They've been amazing conversation for the last hour with, a bunch of men who've had vasectomies and a lot of the people who work in the field here through DKT. And Allison, as well as being a 40 under 40 ICFP recipient, has worked for World Vasectomy Day for a number of years, and just came back from a mission in Bolivia where she'll tell you a little bit about that as well, and just the kind of the way change happens, much quicker sometimes than we think, but the financial, reality is a big part of it. But anyhow, I'll pass the mic on to you, Allison, but we have a bunch of the guys here from Philippines, and by all means, please stay on and keep part, but introduce your people as well, Allison, and we look forward to hearing what you got to say.